At the turn of the 20th century, competing empires engaged in an industrial race to construct the largest and fastest ocean liners in history. The RMS Titanic represented the peak of this ambition. It was a 46,000-ton Leviathan built to push the physical limits of maritime engineering. But while structural engineering was accelerating into the modern era, the regulatory laws governing the ocean remained decades in the past. This comparison shows the silhouette of a typical 1894 passenger ship, dwarfed by the massive 1912 profile of the Titanic. When it sailed, the Titanic was operating legally under British Board of Trade regulations written for those much smaller 19th century vessels. Because the vessel fully complied with the written rules, its maiden voyage functioned as a fatal stress test for a dangerously obsolete legal system. On April 14, 1912, the ship sideswiped an iceberg in the North Atlantic and sank in under 3 hours. Over 1,500 people died. While the ice breached the hull, the lack of legally mandated survival tools caused the high death toll. The global shock of this preventable catastrophe forced immediate inquiries in the United States and Britain. Investigators quickly realized the existing maritime rules were no longer sufficient for ships of this size. The Titanic carried lifeboats for just over half of her passengers. This mathematically inadequate number actually exceeded legal Board of Trade requirements by 10%. Furthermore, the lack of mandatory emergency training meant that passengers and crew were unprepared for an evacuation, resulting in chaotic launches of half-empty boats. This visualization illustrates the rigorous new standards introduced by the SOLAS Treaty. Regulators mandated that ships carry lifeboats for 100% of their passengers and crew, plus additional life rafts to cover another 25%. A secondary operational failure occurred with communication. The nearby SS Californian missed Titanic's distress signals because their sole radio operator was off-duty and asleep. In 1912, wireless radio was treated as a passenger amenity for sending personal telegrams rather than a critical navigational tool. Important ice warnings were often secondary to private messages. The 1912 Radio Act and SOLAS Treaty addressed this by requiring 24-hour continuous radio watches, professionally licensed operators, and absolute priority for distress signals like SOS. Passenger survival was no longer left to the discretion of individual captains and shipping companies, but was instead placed under strict international law. The confidence in an unsinkable vessel relied on a specific flaw deeply embedded in the ship's internal architecture. This cross-section shows the ship's watertight compartments. The vertical bulkheads didn't reach high enough. As the bow pitched downward, water spilled over the tops into the next compartment. To address this, new regulations forced shipbuilders to extend these bulkheads higher and create a double hull construction. The final operational failure was a matter of navigational procedure. In 1912, captains typically maintained full speed through known ice fields in clear weather, relying entirely on visual lookouts in the crow's nest. In 1914, the International Ice Patrol was created. Managed by the U.S. Coast Guard, this agency actively tracks and reports dangerous North Atlantic icebergs. By mandating structural resilience and active hazard avoidance, the industry was required to prioritize passenger safety over record-breaking transit speeds. These forensic investigations and targeted fixes eventually produced the 1914 International Convention for the Safety of Life at Sea, or SOLAS. SOLAS was designed as a living document. It has been updated to integrate new technologies as they emerge, from active radar sweeps to satellite communications and fully enclosed lifeboats. Today, these global standards are overseen and enforced by the International Maritime Organization, a specialized agency of the United Nations. These regulations now govern how 99% of all commercial vessels on the ocean are built and operated. The disaster's primary influence remains the rigorous global safety protocols that now govern every modern voyage, protecting millions of passengers every day.